Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. Hillary Clinton heads to a closed-door House deposition in the Jeffrey Epstein probe. Her testimony follows pressure from lawmakers and the threat of contempt. New details about the FBI seizing phone records during the Biden presidency. Two current Trump officials were targeted before joining the administration. Cuba says it shot and killed 4 people on a U.S.-registered speedboat as tensions rise between the U.S. and its communist neighbor. Vice President Vance tours a manufacturing facility in Wisconsin promoting President Trump's economic agenda. The district's Republican congressman is up for re-election in November. China's footprint at the Panama Canal is shrinking. Panama just canceled C.K. Hutchinson's port contracts after warnings and a legal fight, and the U.S. is calling it a major strategic win.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. Our top story: the United States is investigating after Cuba says it shot and killed 4 men aboard a U.S.-registered speedboat. Cuba says the boat was attempting to infiltrate its territory. Here's what we know.
Cuba says its forces shot and killed 4 people aboard a U.S.-registered boat yesterday. Cuban officials saying the men were heavily armed and were attempting to infiltrate its territory. The country's Interior Ministry says the boat entered Cuban waters. Cuba says 6 of the passengers were injured and are in custody. It also says one of the passengers shot and injured the commander of a Cuban border guard vessel. The ministry described the passengers as Cuban residents of the U.S., adding 2 of the survivors were previously wanted for terrorism. Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying the U.S. Embassy in Havana is working to get access to other people who are aboard the vessel.
Suffice it to say, it is highly unusual to see shootouts in open sea like that. It's not something that happens every day. It's something, frankly, that hasn't happened with Cuba in a very long time. But we're going to find out. We're not going to base our conclusions on what they've told us.
Vice President J.D. Vance says the White House will continue to provide updates.
Certainly, a situation that we're monitoring. Hopefully, it's not as bad as we fear it could be, but can't say more because I just don't know more.
Florida's Attorney General says he's directed the Office of Statewide Prosecution to work with federal, state, and law enforcement to begin an investigation. The incident comes as tensions rise between the U.S. and its communist neighbor following the capture of Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro, a longtime ally of Cuba. Most oil deliveries to the island are now blocked, crippling the country's economy. Halfway across the world, another round of U.S.-Iran talks begin today in Geneva. No big breakthroughs are expected, with Rubio saying Iran was attempting to develop intercontinental ballistic missiles, while the talks will be focused around Tehran's nuclear program. Secretary Rubio commenting yesterday that Iran poses a grave threat to the U.S.
These things have to be addressed. The negotiations tomorrow and the talks tomorrow will be largely focused on the nuclear program. And we hope progress can be made, because that's the president's preference, to make progress on the diplomatic front. But it's also important to remember that Iran refuses to talk about the ballistic missiles.
Vice President Vance says the U.S. is seeking evidence that Iran is trying to rebuild a nuclear weapon after U.S.-led strikes destroyed the country's nuclear facilities last year.
So the president sending those negotiators to try to address that problem. As the president has said repeatedly, he wants to address that problem diplomatically, but of course the president has other options as well.
Iranian officials meanwhile say a fair, balanced deal could still be reached, but Iran will not give up its nuclear ambitions.
And we have accepted not to have nuclear weapons, but at the same time we have full rights to use nuclear technology for peaceful purposes.
The negotiations come as the U.S. builds up its military capability in the region. Iran has threatened to strike U.S. bases if it is attacked. President Trump said 1 week ago that he was giving Tehran about 10 to 15 days to make a deal.
Cuba says its soldiers killed 4 people and wounded 6 others aboard a Florida-registered speedboat that had entered Cuban waters. Joining us to discuss this is John Suarez, Executive Director at the Center for a Free Cuba. So, John, good afternoon to you. Now, Cuba accused the people on the speedboat. Good afternoon. Accusing them of planning an infiltration with terrorist aims. They say those on the boat opened fire first. To start off, I just want to have us take a look at what Secretary Rubio is saying.
What I'm telling you is that we're going to find out exactly what happened and who was involved, and then we'll make a determination on the basis of what we find out. And we're going to find out, but we're not going to just take what somebody else tells us. We're going to find out, and I'm very confident we will be able to know the story and be able to independently verify facts about it.
So, John, in addition to Rubio, Florida Attorney General James Uthmeier telling Fox News the Cuban government cannot be trusted. So what are your thoughts right now on this situation?
Well, the Cuban government is not a reliable narrator. As recently as October 28th of 2022, the Cuban Coast Guard attacked and sank a boat carrying refugees. And in this case, we're talking women and children were among the killed. And they prepared their own narrative. And then when the mother of one of the children killed broke that narrative, she was arrested. So this dictatorship is in a desperate moment trying to distract attention, I believe, from the call by members of Congress to have Raul Castro, General Raul Castro, indicted in the murder of 4 members of Brothers to the Rescue 30 years ago today. He's no longer head of state, so it's open to have him indicted for murder and brought to trial to face justice. And I think that's one of the factors of why the Cuban government want to be distracting with what's taking place at the moment.
So what do you think, let's just imagine here, what might be the consequences if any of the dead or wounded turn out to be U.S. citizens or residents?
It all depends on the circumstances of what took place. And again, we cannot rely on the Cuban government's version of events. So there needs to be an investigation. I think Secretary Rubio is spot on in his comments, as well as other members of Congress, that there needs to be a serious investigation, get to the truth of what took place, who was impacted, and from there you determine what needs to be done. I think it's premature to speculate on what course of action to take when all you have is the Cuban dictatorship's version of events.
All right, understood. So I have another clip here of Rubio talking about the Cuban regime. Let's just take a look at it.
The people of Cuba are suffering today. They've been suffering for a long time. They're suffering now, perhaps more than at any time in recent memory, perhaps in the history since 1959. This is the worst economic climate that Cuba has faced, and it is the authorities there in that government who are responsible for that. They are the ones that have made decisions that have left Cuba vulnerable to the situation they're now in.
So, John, per your expertise, what is the situation right now that the Cuban people are facing?
The Cuban people are facing the worst economic downturn in the regime's history. But this is because the regime, since 1959, for the most part, has been in a downward trajectory with respites, for example, when they were able to hook up into Venezuela and drain them dry of their riches over a period of time. But even during that period of time, when they had large amounts of oil that they were reselling on international markets, people were still on the ration book. People were still suffering. Now that Mr. Maduro is gone, they're in a much more difficult situation. But again, the reason the situation is difficult is because you have communist central planning by Havana. They refuse to reform their system. And concretely, food, 80% of the food that Cubans eat is imported from abroad. The top exporter of food to Cuba today is the United States. Prior to 1959, Cubans were able to feed themselves. They were able to produce enough food to be self-sufficient. But when Fidel Castro arrived on the scene, collectivized agriculture, set up an acopio system, which was a government monopoly over food, food has been a scarce commodity in Cuba, and that's why they've been having to import it. The moment they stopped jailing farmers for trying to sell their produce to other Cubans, and farmers are able to produce and sell their produce in markets in Cuba, you will see a change in the plight of the Cuban people. But this dictatorship over the last 67 years has refused to do that. There are farmers locked up today because they were growing chicken, cattle, fruits, and vegetables, and were trying to sell it directly to other Cubans. And the Cuban government wants them to deliver it to an acopio, which is a government agency, And we know from independent reporting inside the island that when you send it to the government agency, up to 50% of that food rots and the farmers aren't paid on time. So there's also a factor that discourages them from production when dealing with the state.
So, John, you mentioned briefly that Nicolas Maduro has been arrested by the U.S. I just have a question for you on that. What has been the impact of that? What has been the impact of the oil embargo on Cuba? And what is the U.S. really doing to make sure that the oil doesn't get into Cuba?
Well, the media coverage around this, which shows piles of garbage in the streets of Havana, and tries to attribute that to the oil embargo, hasn't paid attention over the last several years that the garbage has been accumulating, because there hasn't been gasoline for ambulances and for other vehicles that would directly help the Cuban people. What there has been gasoline for is the police cars, the cars of the secret police to repress the Cuban people. Thus, one of the things that we're seeing post January 3rd is that the regime is much more desperate, because they know when the fuel runs out for their vehicles, they're going to have an issue next time you have an uprising. But I would like to mention, yesterday the Treasury Department did announce that the United States will permit the sale of Venezuelan oil to Cuba, but not to the Cuban government, to private entities in Cuba. Now, that's a bit of a challenge, because most of the private entities in Cuba are linked to the Cuban military. So that's going to require a great amount of discretion and discernment by the U.S. government in who to award that possibility to in terms of receiving oil from abroad.
Right, right. I mean, that does seem like it is a challenge. But let me ask you something else as well. So Representative Carlos Jimenez said in a statement saying that the regime in Cuba must be relegated to the dustbin of history for its countless crimes against humanity. And he also said on Fox News that the regime is in its weakest position right now, on top of President Trump saying that Cuba will be falling pretty soon. So in your view, what do you think here? Is the Cuban regime on the verge of toppling?
I think the regime won't fall of its own accord. I think it needs to be pushed. But I do think things like the regime had lied for decades that they did not have a military and intelligence presence in Cuba. The 32 members of the military and Cuban intelligence that were killed during the U.S. operation to extradite Maduro exposed that lie, and also exposed it exposed that the myth of the Cubans' intelligence service and military being so top-notch and being able to compete with the U.S., it was dealt a body blow psychologically, and I think that hurts it within the populace. Secondly, Cuba currently has at least 7,000 Cuban mercenaries fighting in Ukraine, and they've been denying that they've been forcibly encouraging that, but obviously their relationship with Russia, the military agreements with Belarus, which is also assisting Russia in the war in Ukraine, indicates that there is a large Cuban presence. The Ukrainian intelligence service says that since 2022, with this latest round of the war, there have been over 25,000 Cuban mercenaries fighting in Ukraine for Mr. Putin. And that also takes away some of their resources to repress inside of the island.
Okay, really great hearing your analysis today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Nuclear talks between the U.S. and Iran just wrapped up today in Geneva, Switzerland. Delegates from the U.S. and Iran met for several hours along with Omani mediators. The foreign minister of Oman, who is acting as the mediator, says, quote, "We have finished the day after significant progress in the negotiation between the United States and Iran. We will resume soon after consultation in the respective capitals." He adds that they will discuss more next week in Vienna. Earlier in the day, the Omani minister said the two sides exchanged creative and positive ideas. Iran also said the two sides exchanged very constructive proposals. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and President Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner are leading the U.S. delegation. This is the third round of nuclear talks in Geneva. It's believed to be a last chance for diplomacy. The Trump administration has gathered a fleet of aircraft and warships in the Middle East to pressure Iran into a deal. All right, we'll be taking a quick break now, but we'll be back with more news that you don't want to miss, so stick around.
Getting prescription glasses from Select Specs is easier than you might think. Select your frames from our £6 range in-house brands or our extensive designer collections. Then enter, upload or email your latest prescription and our website will analyze it and help you select the best lenses and options to suit you. Click to place the order and your new Select Specs glasses are delivered right to your door. Ordering your prescription glasses is as easy as 1, 2, C with Select Specs at selectspecs.com.
I'm Jonathan Lawson. If you're 50 to 85, I have an important message about security. Write down the number on your screen so you can call when I finish. The lock I want to talk to you about isn't the one on your door. This is a lock for your life insurance, a rate lock that guarantees that once you're insured, your rate can never go up at any time for any reason. But be careful. Many policies you see do not have one. But you can get a lifetime rate lock from Colonial Penn. Call this number to learn more. This plan was designed with a rate lock for people on a fixed income who want life insurance that fits their budget and is simple to get. Coverage options start at $9.95 a month, less than 35 cents a day. Act now, and your rate will be locked in for life. It will never increase, guaranteed. This is lifelong coverage that can never be canceled as long as you pay your premiums, guaranteed. And your acceptance is guaranteed, with no health questions. You cannot be turned down because of your health. Call for your information kit and read about this rate lock for yourself. You'll also get a free beneficiary planner. Both are free with no obligation. Don't miss out. Call for information, then decide. Read about the 30-day 100% money-back guarantee. Don't wait. Call this number now.
Call now and you will also get this free beneficiary planner. Use this valuable guide to record important information and your final wishes, and it's yours free just for calling. So don't wait. Call 1-800-357-4821 for your free information. That's 1-800-357-4821. There's no risk or obligation. That number again is 1-800-357-4821. That's 1-800-357-4821. 1-800-357-4821. Call now.
Hi, I'm Smokey Bear, and I made an assistant to help you out, because only you can prevent wildfires.
Hey, Assistant Smokey Bear, call me Papa Bear, because I'm grilling up dinner. Do you get it?
Yes, good job.
So, what should I do with all these coals?
Don't just toss them out. Put them in a metal container because those embers can start a wildfire.
I understand. The stakes are high.
Ha, 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 ha.
See, Smokey thinks I'm funny.
Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is testifying today in a closed-door session before the House Oversight Committee. The panel is investigating the case of convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Here's committee chair James Comer.
To my knowledge, the Clintons haven't answered very many, if any, questions about their knowledge or involvement with Epstein and Maxwell. Again, no one's accusing at this moment the Clintons of any wrongdoing. They're going to have due process, but we have a lot of questions, and the purpose of the whole investigation is to try to understand many things about Epstein. How did he accumulate so much wealth? How was he able to surround himself with some of the most powerful men in the world? Was he an asset for our government or any other government? These are the questions that we're going to ask over the next 2 days, and hopefully we'll be able to get some answers.
Comer says this will be a long deposition and committee members will keep the public updated. In the opening statement, Clinton says she knows nothing about Epstein. She and former President Bill Clinton initially declined to appear after being subpoenaed, but later agreed after lawmakers moved toward contempt proceedings. Bill Clinton is expected to testify tomorrow. Transcripts of the interviews will be released publicly. Committee Chair Comer says it's also possible that Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick may be called to testify. The secretary testified earlier this month before a Senate panel after his name appeared in the Epstein files. Epstein died in jail in 2019 while awaiting trial on federal sex trafficking charges. New details emerging about the FBI's collection of phone records during the Biden administration. The FBI seized phone records of two people who are now top Trump administration officials. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has the details.
We're now learning that the FBI's reach was further than just obtaining phone records from Republican lawmakers at the time that the DOJ was investigating Trump in several cases. FBI Director Kash Patel and Trump's current chief of staff, Susie Wiles, were also targets of the FBI. The Bureau under Biden's presidency obtained phone records from these two, Patel and Wiles, two current Trump officials at the time that they were private citizens. Both Patel and Wiles have long been close allies of the president, even before the start of this administration, and notably they held close ties with Trump leading up to and during his 2024 campaign. Their phone records were seized around the time of the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case, and FBI Director Kash Patel said investigators used subpoenas to obtain something known as toll records, which shows the timing and people involved on calls, but not the content of the conversations. Still, Patel called the move outrageous and deeply alarming that the previous FBI leadership secretly subpoenaed their records. The big concern here is how hidden this process was. Patel said the process and the related files were buried in prohibited case files designed to evade all oversight. Former special counsel Jack Smith, when testifying to Congress recently, was under fire from Republicans for the seizure of lawmakers' records, but Smith asserted he followed the laws and DOJ procedures. Patel said he recently ended the FBI's ability to categorize files as prohibited to try to prevent something like this from being hidden in the future. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Vice President J.D. Vance toured a manufacturing facility in Wisconsin today with Republican Congressman Derek Van Orden. The vice president took the opportunity to promote President Trump's economic agenda ahead of November's midterm elections. During his remarks, Vance criticized Democrats, arguing that they don't prioritize American workers.
Watch a speech when these guys talk about illegal immigration, and then watch a speech when they talk about manufacturing jobs for American workers. That doesn't give him passion. That gives Donald Trump passion. That gives Derek Van Orden passion. The idea that every single one of you should have a good job, a good life if you work hard and play by the rules. The idea that our young families should be able to own a stake in their country. That's what fires us up. That's what we're fighting for in government. But you watch these congressional Democrats, what really fires them up, they get really mad at the idea that we're deporting illegal immigrants. They talk about the dreams of illegal immigrants who have come into our country, but what about the dreams of you and your children? Because that's who I'm fighting for. That's who Donald Trump is fighting for, and that's who Derek Van Orden is fighting for.
The facility where Vance was speaking in Wisconsin's 3rd congressional district. Trump carried the district by 7 points in 2024, part of a sweep of battleground states that put him back in the White House. The president has endorsed the district's representative, Derek Van Orden, for the 2026 midterms. Vance's comments followed Trump's State of the Union address on Tuesday. Trump is scheduled to visit Texas for an event focused on energy and the economy later in the week. A former U.S. Air Force pilot has been arrested for allegedly providing defense services to the Chinese military. Federal officials say 65-year-old Gerald Eddie Brown Jr. was taken into custody in Indiana. The former F-35 instructor pilot was charged with violating the Arms Export Control Act. Prosecutors allege Brown conspired to train pilots with China's People Liberation Army Air Force without the required State Department license. According to the complaint, Brown traveled to China in late 2023. He allegedly provided combat aircraft instruction there after coordinating with foreign nationals. One of those individuals was a previously convicted Chinese hacker tied to military espionage. The Justice Department and the FBI saying the case underscores growing efforts by Beijing to exploit former U.S. military expertise. They vow to hold anyone who assists America's adversaries accountable. Google Threat Intelligence Group says they disrupted a Chinese-linked hacking group that breached at least 53 organizations across 42 countries. The report says the hacker group tracked as UNC 2814, also known as Gallium, has a long history of targeting international governments and global telecommunications organizations. Google says the hacking campaign is separate from Salt Typhoon, a major Chinese regime-backed cyber espionage campaign. The company says its efforts have terminated the group's access to a backdoor, disabled its infrastructure, and revoked its accounts and access to relevant Google products. The White House says big tech leaders will meet with President Trump next week. They're expected to pledge their AI data centers will not increase energy bills for the average American. A White House official telling the Epoch Times the March 4th meeting will include reps from Amazon, Google, Meta, Microsoft, Oracle, OpenAI, and Elon Musk's xAI. During his State of the Union address this week, Trump said tech companies had agreed to pay a greater share of the cost of electricity. Trump saying Tuesday that he's telling the major tech companies that they have the obligation to provide for their own power needs. The meeting comes as customers are starting to pay more and more as data centers boost electric demand and put stress on the supply. Now, the latest on the social media addiction trial in Los Angeles, with jurors hearing from a data science expert about how platforms generate billions of dollars in ad revenue. NTD's Christina Corona reports from the courthouse.
We're outside the Los Angeles Superior Courthouse, where an engineer and data science professor took the stand today. Professor John Chandler testified, saying how social media companies generate billions of dollars through ad revenue from young users under the age of 18. Professor John Chandler told jurors that research estimates showed platforms made billions of dollars from users under 18, including roughly $5 billion from Instagram and more than $2 billion from YouTube in a single year. However, YouTube attorneys pushed back, questioning how Chandler calculated watch time and ad exposure, and pointing out that he does not personally use Instagram or knew all of the features offered on the app. Jurors were also shown how ads play on the YouTube app and showed Bad Bunny's NFL halftime performance as an example of how ads pop up. Plaintiff attorney Mark Lanier went into detail describing how ads are customized to certain users, saying when they log into their YouTube, they are actually logging into their Google account, which can send them ads based on their search history. He also mentioned how children who lied about their age are being fed adult advertisements.
For years, Big Tech has hidden behind predatory design, coercive tactics to manipulate, exploit, and addict my generation of young people, stealing the meaning of digital community right out from under us. And I say no more.
Many survivor parents attend the trial each day, and on Wednesday, about 20 held a press conference outside the courthouse. They called for what they described as common-sense legislative solutions to address social media's impact on young users. One mother, who lost her 12-year-old son after what she says was a dangerous online challenge, urged tech companies to change what content is allowed for children. Reporting from downtown Los Angeles, Christina Corona, NTD News.
And just in this morning, Instagram launches a new teen safety measure. The company says it will soon alert parents if their teen repeatedly searches for suicide or self-harm content within a short period of time. The feature will roll out in the coming weeks to families enrolled in Instagram's parental supervision program. The move comes as Meta and other tech companies face growing legal pressure over the impact of social media on teens. And lawmakers who were inside Hillary Clinton's closed-door deposition in the Epstein investigation are now stepping out to speak with reporters. Let's take a look at what they're saying.
2 hours plus 2.5 hours, and so that it will continue throughout the day. And so, going to be also respectful of not being specific, but we do have some overall statements to make. And a lot of this obviously ties into what the Secretary has already put out herself in her opening statement. Just want to begin by just clarifying and putting emphasis on something that's very important, and it's something the Secretary herself has said. Secretary Clinton never met Jeffrey Epstein. She never visited the island. She never flew on his plane. She also had no knowledge of Jeffrey Epstein's horrific crimes. So zero knowledge of any wrongdoing. And you've also all heard that directly from her. Secretary Clinton is also completely cooperating with the deposition and the committee and is answering questions in full faith and in good faith. What is not acceptable is oversight Republicans breaking their own committee rules that they established with the Secretary and her team which you've all reported and you've seen by releasing photos. Not acceptable, and it was gracious of the secretary and her team to continue the deposition. What we also want to say at this very moment is it's becoming more clear every single day is the questions continue to build around this DOJ and the White House and the focus of the majority. We want to understand right now where the missing FBI files are. These are files that accuse the President of the United States about serious accusations around sexual abuse. And the fact that they're not in the files and have been apparently either removed or discarded is incredibly concerning. And so we're calling on Attorney General Pam Bondi to immediately release those files. And lastly, I want to also add that this committee has now set a new precedent about talking to presidents and former presidents. And we're demanding immediately that we ask President Trump to testify in front of our committee and be deposed in front of oversight Republicans and Democrats. And that should happen immediately. He is the person that appears almost more than anyone else in the committee, and it needs to happen right now.
Mr. Chairman, do you distinguish at all between a president and a former president and a sitting president? I mean, is there something in there? Because they will say, wait a minute. We know
I think
what the court ruled on his immunity.
We should depose the person that is mentioned in the Epstein files almost more than any other person next to Ghislaine Maxwell, and that's Donald Trump. We're gonna have a couple comments, and then we're gonna go ahead. I'm gonna answer a couple questions.
Thank you. Thank you. House Republicans need to get serious about this investigation. I understand now fully why Secretary Clinton wanted to make this deposition and her hearing public, because the reality is we are talking to the wrong person today. Who we should be talking to instead are people who are actually mentioned in the files, people who have made misleading statements about their relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Earlier today, Chairman Comer mentioned being open to talking to Secretary Lutnick. Well, let's get him in. Let's talk to Secretary Lutnick instead. Let's talk to someone who is neighbors with Jeffrey Epstein, who actually associated with Jeffrey Epstein, not someone who had never, ever met Jeffrey Epstein to their knowledge. And so let's try to talk about people who will help us with our investigation. And let's release the 2.5 million files so we can know who else to talk to and so we can do right by the victims and actually bring justice. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Congresswoman Yasamin Ansari representing Arizona's 3rd District. I am extremely appalled by the Republican chairman's behavior today and by the behavior of the entire committee and how unserious they are about this investigation. Let's remind the country about what we are actually talking about. Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and a list of many rich and powerful people from around the United States and around the world abused and raped more than 1,000 people who were children, many of whom were children at the time. And today we are sitting through an incredibly unserious clown show of a deposition where members of Congress and the Republican Party are more concerned about getting their photo op of Secretary Clinton than actually getting to the truth and holding anyone accountable. I also want to talk about the reporting from this week and the fact that we now know that the Department of Justice, in their ongoing cover-up, the most egregious cover-up in American history, intentionally seem to have redacted more or withheld more than 50 pages of allegations from a minor against President Trump. Do not forget that Kash Patel went in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee and said under oath that the FBI had no credible allegations of any other people being involved in this child sex trafficking operation. These documents that the Department of Justice intentionally has withheld from the American public in regard to the allegations against President Trump came from the FBI. The FBI had interviewed this witness 4 times. You do not do that if it is not serious. So Kash Patel needs to be immediately brought back before the Oversight Committee. He needs to answer these questions again, and we need answers immediately. Again, America is watching. Young people in this country are watching to see if powerful people will continue to protect other powerful people and whether or not Congress will actually hold these perpetrators accountable. Thank you.
Wesley Bell, Missouri's 1st Congressional District. And as a former prosecutor, I've been involved in leading investigations in serious offenses, and this ain't it. What we're seeing is political theater. What we're seeing is folks that are looking for headlines and tweets as opposed to doing the business of going about getting justice for the victims in this case, and survivors in this case, I should say, as well. And I think that that's what I think some of our friends on the other side are losing sight of, is that we are here to make certain that justice is served. And it's important for us, and as oversight members, to do our job to ensure that all the evidence, any information is heard, and that any victims, any survivors' voices are heard as well. And that's what we're supposed to be doing. And so what we're seeing today is we have not learned one new thing. The secretary is here. She is more than happy to have all of you come in there and into this deposition and hear her out. But there are those on the other side of the aisle who do not want that for whatever reason. And so we're going to continue to push for justice. We're going to continue to work to make certain that the victims and survivors are given their due and their voices are heard and that justice is ultimately served.
Thank you. I'm James Walkinshaw from Virginia's 11th District. The Trump administration's treatment of the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's crimes has been a callous disregard. We've seen that in his refusal to release the files. We saw that this week at the State of the Union with his refusal to acknowledge the survivors who were in the chamber. One of the things that's been confirmed today is that in addition to having no relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, Secretary Clinton has no relationship with Ghislaine Maxwell. But there are important questions we should be asking the Trump administration about Ghislaine Maxwell. And I hope that our Republican colleagues will join us in asking these questions. Why is it that Donald Trump has refused to rule out the pardon, the clemency that Ghislaine Maxwell is campaigning for? We held a deposition in this committee with Ghislaine Maxwell. She used that deposition as an opportunity to campaign for a pardon. Chairman Comer then walked out before many of you and gave her talking points as to why she should get a pardon. Donald Trump needs to direct Attorney General Bondi to release all the files, to unredact the illegal redactions, and he needs to unequivocally rule out a pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell, who is a monster, convicted of child sex trafficking. Why has he not ruled out pardoning her? Why did the Deputy Attorney General spend hours with her? And then why was she transferred to a cushy, lower security prison? Those are important questions we should be asking about Ghislaine Maxwell. We no longer have to ask whether there's any relationship between Secretary Clinton and Ghislaine Maxwell. There was not.
I'm gonna answer a couple of questions.
And you were just watching Democratic lawmakers speaking after the deposition of Hillary Clinton relating to the Jeffrey Epstein files and reiterating what Secretary Clinton has said, that she had no contact with Jeffrey Epstein, did not know of his actions, has never been on his plane, and has not been to his island, and also saying that Secretary Clinton had no relation with Ghislaine Maxwell. Okay, moving on. What is the impact of Trump's State of the Union address on the midterm elections? Joining us to discuss is Javier Palomares, founder and CEO of the U.S. Hispanic Business Council and former Obama campaign advisor. And we have Matt Klink, Republican strategist and political analyst. So first of all, good afternoon to you both. Thank you very much for being here. Matt, I'd like to start with you. So the question is, did Trump hit on all the necessary points in his address to convince the public to vote for his party come the midterms?
Well, I'll be a little tongue-in-cheek. If he didn't hit on it in almost 2 hours, I don't know what else there is left to say. No, in all seriousness, look, he focused on issues primarily the economy. That I know that my colleague will probably say something to the effect of the poll numbers are upside down for Trump on the economy. I would argue that the Republicans are still +3 on the economy over Democrats from an alternative perspective. What he also talked about, and he spent considerable amount of time on, were issues that Republicans hold double-digit advantages over Democrats. One being crime, another being immigration, and another being border security. I think what you saw from Donald Trump in that address was a lengthy discussion about the issues that Donald Trump and the Republicans in Congress need to fight the midterms about. And he also countered fairly strongly, he didn't do it as strong as I would have, the laughable response about Democrats now talking about affordability when the Biden and Harris administration completely destroyed affordability, and Donald Trump is attempting to turn that oil tanker. It's just that you can't fix 4 years of mess ups in 1 year, but Donald Trump is doing everything he can to make that happen.
Okay, Javier, give us your response, and how do you view what Trump said in that address?
I mean, I agree with some of the points that Matt made. Inarguably, there's some good news, but when it comes to the State of the Union, Republicans will say that it was the best State of the Union they've ever heard. Democrats will say that it missed the mark woefully. Look, at the end of the day, the only thing that truly matters is how the American voter feels. And American voters that were with him before the State of the Union are still with him. American voters that were against him before the State of the Union are still against him. And I don't think that this State of the Union did enough to change the mind of those American voters that were on the fence.
All right, speaking of the voters, there was a moment there that I want to bring up here where Trump invited Democrats to stand up to show support. Matt, I think you know where I'm going with this. Let's take a look at this clip.
So tonight I'm inviting every legislator to join with my administration in reaffirming a fundamental principle. If you agree with this statement, then stand up and show your support. The first duty of the American government is to protect American citizens, not illegal aliens.
So Matt, Javier brings up the idea that it's about what viewers see, right? So how do you think viewers or voters saw this moment, Matt?
Well, look, there's already ads out about this right now. So that was a made-for-TV moment that Donald Trump set up on purpose. The Democrats played true to form. He knew that they weren't going to stand. And look, it's very reality-based. Democrats do care more about illegal immigrants than they do about American citizens. Just look at what happened in New York with them giving Visa cards and hotel rooms to people that entered this country illegally, and yet they'll let American veterans sleep on the street. So again, this is a Republican plus, I think it's a +13 issue for Republicans. The Republicans are going to hammer it home. It was a driving factor for Trump's victory in 2024. And again, this is going to be something that he is going to campaign on aggressively in 2026, that we can't trust to put the radical Democrats back in power so that they can try to open the border again. So whether it resonates or not, it depends upon Donald Trump getting out and being a spokesperson for his policies.
Javier, your comments.
It was artfully played. Donald Trump, no question, he's a showman. He set this one up and the Democrats played right into it. But look, again, showmanship is one thing and moments like this are one thing. I'll go back to the fact of the matter that what truly is important here is how the American voter feels. Look, we did our own internal polling of over 1,300 small business owners that are members of our association. The beginning of this year, actually the end of last year, when Donald Trump had just won, his approval rating was at 70% amongst our small business owners. On January the 15th, we fielded another report, and it dropped from 70% down to 40%. Those are the facts. And so there's moments like this that are actually fun to watch, because Donald Trump, he's a showman. I'd never want to go up against that guy. But what truly matters is what the American people, the American voter is feeling. And I am polling those people all of the time. And by the way, the 40% that our constituency said he's at in terms of approval kind of matches what the CNNs and the CBSs and the NBCs of this world are saying. They're saying he's anywhere from 38 to 40%. There's no doubt that Donald Trump has done a lot of good, particularly when it comes to the economy. Closing the border, unquestionably done an amazing job, but they've overstepped. And so now you've got members of my constituency, the small business owners in the agricultural sector, the construction sector, the hospitality sector, and even tech and manufacturing. These industries, which are cornerstone industries to the American economy, rely on immigrant labor. And right now we are in a very bad situation because A, we didn't have enough manpower to begin with. And now these industries that relied on immigrants are not getting the workforce they need to get the job done. And so there needs to be some kind of regulation, some kind of, stepping back from being overly aggressive when it comes to this issue of immigration. Did he close the border? Unquestionably. And he did an amazing job of that. But now they've overstepped. So they got to figure out how to come back to the industries that put him in office to begin with, and the community that put him in office to begin with, which is Hispanics. Both of them, his approval rating has dropped in both of those key kind of categories. And so there's work to be done yet. There's a State of the Union, and there's things that happen at the State of the Union. But then there are the facts of the American voters and the small business owners that are paying the bill. And he needs to kind of start to address those issues.
Okay, Matt, before you respond here, just before you respond here, I have a clip here. You guys bring up numbers, polling numbers. Javier says maybe President Trump overstepped on immigration. But take a look at this clip of a poll showing Democrats standing on immigration, just quickly.
This, I think, is so important to note. After all the events in Los Angeles, after all the events in Minneapolis, after all the events of the last year on immigration, can Democrats actually take advantage on this issue? And a look at the polling suggests actually no. They're in a worse position than they were at this point during Donald Trump's first term. Take a look here. Show us which party more on immigration. In 2018, Democrats had an edge of about 6 points. You come over to this side of the screen now. Look at that. Republicans are the ones who actually have an edge on immigration.
Okay, Matt, please, your response.
Yeah, I mean, let's parse what Javier said. And look, I agree with you, Javier, in first, that State of the Unions don't have what we in our industry call legs, meaning that it's a temporary bump, if that. They don't influence politics or political decision-making in the long run. But it's disturbing what Javier said. So first of all, Donald Trump was very vocal in saying that he supports legal immigration. He made a point of saying that in his speech. But by not defining the difference between legal and illegal, you're basically giving tens of millions of people who snuck into this country illegally a free pass to stay. And if businesses are dependent on illegal labor that are not properly paying taxes and that are not properly papered to be in this country, that is incredibly disturbing. And frankly, those employers deserve to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. We have a legal immigration process that needs to be followed and that has been a great success. Unfortunately, we have a Democratic Party that has subsisted on open borders for far too long. In fact, the Biden administration let in upwards of 10+ million people that we have no idea where they are in this country right now. So,
okay,
to hear no differentiation between legal and illegal immigrants, it really makes me concerned that, I mean, that's the problem that the Democratic Party has. They just see immigrant. They don't differentiate between legal and illegal.
Okay, Javier, a couple of things please respond to. First, the poll numbers that CNN presented, and number two, Matt says there needs to be a distinction between legal and illegal immigration, and employers who employ illegal immigrants, should be prosecuted. Your reactions?
Matt's right. If you're knowingly employing people who are here illegally, you should be prosecuted, no question. He's also right that the Biden administration did very little to stem the tide of immigrants, whether legal or illegal, and sadly, too many were illegal coming into this country. But again, we got to stick to the facts. And here are the facts, Matt. 73% of the people that have been rounded up by this administration and pulled out of this country, in fact, did not have any kind of criminal record. Those are the people that were working in agriculture, manufacturing,
into the country.
We can argue all day long. All day long. And that's where the Republicans are missing the point. They've made up their mind that they're on the right track.
By coming into the country.
And to a large extent, you are on the right track. But this is not unlike the same concerns I had with the Biden administration. There was once a president named Biden, and he argued about this thing called Bidenomics. And it talked about record stock highs and the GDP and all these macroeconomic arguments, which were right. Just like these arguments the Republicans are making are right. But the American family, consider, the president talked about record highs in the stock market. 93% of the stock market, of the people who own stock, that's less than 10% of Americans. Less than 10% of the wealthiest Americans own 93% of the stock in this country, which means that the other 90% of Americans don't even play in that game. So even if it's true, it doesn't impact the American family. I'm not arguing the facts. Those are accurate, but it doesn't matter to 90% of Americans who don't even own stock. That's my point. Well, I had the same argument with the Biden administration that I'm having with Republicans right now. They're stuck on their track and they're not listening to the American people and the American small business community. You can do it all day long, but already the warning signs are here. Look at what happened in New Jersey. Look at what happened in Virginia. Look at what happened right here down the street in Texas. What were normally Republican-held districts or governorships were lost to Democrats. The early warning signals are here, and stubbornly, this administration is doing exactly what the Biden administration did.
Can I say
They're
something
stuck
about
on
it?
All right, Matt.
Yeah, well, again, you're selectively choosing comments because what you failed to mention was gasoline prices are down significantly that they were from the Biden administration, which helps not only families, but it also helps small business owners. Looking at families, the price of eggs is down radically over what they were under the Biden administration. Inflation is ultimately lower across the board. Interest rates are down, which helps not only businesses, small businesses get loans, but families buy houses. So progress has been made. The challenge is, again, this is what's laughable, is when you talk about affordability, going back to higher taxes and more regulation, which Abigail Spanberger is doing in Virginia right now, that's not a recipe for success in the long run. And that doesn't help small businesses, and it certainly doesn't help families. So again, Republicans, they were winning New Jersey was a long shot. The race for Virginia governor, you can only serve one term. That was always going to be a tough one for the Republicans to hold, especially with Donald Trump in power in the White House. If you look at how those races move, ultimately, 2026 is going to be fought on the voters' views of how they feel about the economy, period. And I would much rather be Donald Trump heading in to the November elections than to be the Biden or the Democrats heading into a Biden administration. Because what ultimately has happened, you're going to get huge tax break from the one big beautiful bill, which your members are all going to benefit from, as well as if Congress funds what Donald Trump said to give small business owners and wage earners the opportunity to invest in the stock market, that's going to help too. So come November, I think you're going to see big changes in the economy. And if that happens, good things will happen for Republicans. If it doesn't, then it won't. So, I mean, that's just how politics work.
All right. Javier, we're just about out of time here. Javier, just one quick comment from you, and then we'll end the conversation.
Look, I don't argue with Matt that some of the points that were made in the State of the Union were absolutely accurate and correct. I don't argue that on a macro level we are doing well as a nation. I have the same argument with the previous Democratic administration as I'm having with this Republican administration. Not all is bad, but not all is great. And the fact of the matter is that the numbers are the numbers. We can talk past each other all day long, but the approval rating amongst the American voter right now is down to 40%. And after all of this work and this State of the Union, it hasn't changed. And so my only counsel to this Republican administration is that all the business community ever wants is a stable environment in which we continue to invest, to grow jobs, and grow the American economy. And we need stability. We need a calm leader and a calm administration to kind of usher in that kind of an environment. We are behind any administration that is trying to do the right thing and get this economy back on track. There's a lot of things that have happened that are good, but this State of the Union did nothing to address the issues that are not good. And that's just the end of it. I mean, that's the way the American people feel. And no matter how much Matt and I agree or disagree on the air, at the end of the day, it matters very little to the American voter.
All right, we have to leave the conversation there. Great comments from both of you. Thank you so much, Javier and Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hong Kong company CK Hutchison complained on Tuesday that Panama authorities had threatened its employees with criminal prosecution if they refused to leave two strategic canal ports, one at each end of the Panama Canal. The canal becoming a centerpiece in the influence battle between Beijing and Washington. Panama on Monday published a Supreme Court ruling from January that canceled key port contracts held by a subsidiary of CK Hutchison. The publication ultimately annulled the company's right to operate the ports. The Trump administration has pushed Panama to make this move as the Panama Canal is a strategically important asset to the U.S. Progress reported at the U.S.-Iran nuclear talks in Switzerland, what the mediator says coming out of the talks, and what we can expect next. More news after this break. Don't go away.
Performance that truly matters for each and every one of us. This is what you've been waiting for. See it at least once in your lifetime. Shen Yun. Get tickets now at shenyun.com.
For the first time ever, we're bringing you MyPillow mattresses and mattress toppers for as low as $99.98. Remember, sleep's all about temperature and pressure points. Whatever sleep needs you have, we have the right technology for you. Like our MyPillow mattress topper, our queen size has over 10,000 individual comfort supports to help relieve your pressure points. And how about our 3-inch Hybrid Plus mattress topper? It's infused with copper and silver to help your body get the restorative sleep it needs. And our MyPillow and Case Coil mattresses, I personally helped develop these mattresses to make sure they have everything needed to give us great sleep. Plus, they're made right here in the USA, and they ship right to your front door, absolutely free. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to get MyPillow mattresses and toppers for as low as $99.98 and free shipping.
My mom and dad were traditional Asian parents. And my father would go to work before I woke up in the morning. And then he would come home too tired to play with me. I tell my son, I love you every single day. Now, my dad has never said that to me. Not because he doesn't love me, but because culturally it wasn't comfortable for him. So I teased him the other day and I said, how come you never say that to me? And he said, you're too old now. Now that he's a grandfather, he says, I love you to my son every time he sees him.